want to jump in and discuss a common problem, probably one of the most common problems within kind of endurance sport, especially within the cycling and running communities. And that is this issue around having tight hip flexors and this kind of potential quad dominance that people are worried about. People are worried that they are, I think that the term being quad dominant it's been thrown around so much now that unfortunately those that are innocent, who don't really understand the physiological effects of demands of their sports, they will start to think that they are doing too much in one area, and potentially they will refrain. And I've heard this numerous times where they will hold back on developing their lower body because they feel like they're overdeveloped because of this dominance, which is obviously ludicrous because it's counterintuitive. You're doing exactly what your body needs more of. And I think it's breaking this concept down and understanding that yes, you certainly do have tight hip flexors. You certainly do feel that feeling of having overly dominant and tight quadriceps is a real thing, because you are struggling with that, and the symptoms that you're experiencing, you find it very hard to find that extension. You're more comfortable in those seated positions. You find feel like with that. You do as much mobility and as much rolling and myofascial work as possible on a daily basis, some of you, but you're still having these reoccurring symptoms. And again, guys, well, this is the point, right? Is that the fact that you're simply still focusing on the symptoms, and although it gives you relief in these, you've got to be kind of really starting to think about what the problem is, and it. Strangely, crazily, in this day and age, with all this information, education, and the qualifications we have available, we still are following these antiquated, kind of archaic practices where you're still having this kind of trigger point massage done into your quadriceps and hip flexor region, because it's a service, and you can pay for it, and it's a nice little business for a lot of people out there who are just working on these common areas of issue, but. I personally don't want you having to pay out left, right, on a weekly basis for a bunch of symptoms that you could actually solve, which is where you're focusing on the problem at hand. And if I'm honest, guys, it's the fact is that you are significantly weak in other areas. You are not shining the light enough on areas of weakness, which is going to be your posterior chain, guys. Like, there's no doubt about it. I think if we were to put another problem alongside this, it would be the fact that we're so sedentary, and I think we sit a lot in our day-to-day lifestyles. But I think we're all aware of this, which is the compounding the compounding issue alongside these tight hip flexors. And again, this can make us feel like we're just compounding the issues over and over again. But the answer, guys, to 9 hours of sitting down because of the work you have to do, and the answer to the issues that you're struggling with through your hip flexors, through your hips, through your pelvic tilt that you've been told that you have, it's because you simply got to put some work into your posterior chain. You've got to develop stronger hamstrings, stronger glutes. You've got to start working on those opposing muscle groups, because it's just something that you're still not being held accountable to. And if you're listening to this and you are someone that struggles with this, or has struggled with it in the past and is probably likely to struggle with it again in the future, just take a step back from your training program and honestly reflect on whether you put enough work into those opposing muscle groups, those supporting, stabilizing muscle groups. Do you have good, strong strength and conditioning through your lower back, through your glutes, through your hamstrings? Are you able to extend with power, with speed? I question whether you train that on a daily, weekly basis, because you're obviously doing so much other volume and training elsewhere. But we've got to think about the mechanics of the issue, and this isn't being stressed enough. We are walking into an environment at the moment where we're laying down on our back, we're getting massage, we're getting work done into those key areas, we're getting needles, we're getting rubbed, we're getting all this type of different stuff is happening. We're kind of doing a lot of myofascial work with ourselves. We're kind of sticking all kinds of instruments into our psoas, into our gracilis, into all those key hip flexor group muscles, muscle groups. But yet we're still not really getting that satisfaction of consistent relief. And it's because you're not focusing on the problem at hand. Is that you are chronically imbalanced, and you are potentially overworking that area, massively so. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that your body has got to a point where it's overly worked, overly balanced. So guys, I really want to kind of give you some clarity on how we can work through this. But before I do, it was a really nice saw a a fellow S&C coach talking about this, based over in Australia, Lachlan Wilmot, great strength and conditioning coach, but he was defining it as, obviously the muscles being weak, and these muscles, your muscles hate being weak, but their solution is obviously for them to contract over time. So because essentially, no matter what you do, your body will keep giving you what you want to do. Your body will simply keep working and keep giving you an output until it can't. But because they are weak, because these muscle groups are weak and deconditioned, the origin or insertion points want to become closer and closer together, because the closer they are, the more likely they are to create better tension, and they're going to be more ability to be able to handle force and load, which essentially, so if we're talking about cycling or running, like those hip flexor group, those quadriceps are taking the brunt of the work. There's no doubt about it. They are your dominant muscle groups, because you're much stronger in those areas. But because of this reason, your hip flexors, they're going to get closer and closer, they get tighter and tighter, become more congested in and around that region, because they're able to produce tension and handle force much more effectively. Likewise, if you are overly stretching an area, you lose force. Okay, so your tendons and ligaments want to find that optimal length where they resonate at the best frequency. But when you are very weak and deconditioned, likewise in your adductors, the inside of your groin, much like your hip flexors, they become chronically tight, and because they are literally trying to handle the force and load that you're putting through them. But as a result, as they get shortened, your body's adapting, and they just get shorter and shorter because you're still asking them to handle a hell of a lot of force, hell of a lot of work. And this is why they're just adapting and they're surviving. They're allowing you to continue to create the output, to work at the distances and the intensities that you're working at, up until a point. And like essentially our bodies are designed to produce and maintain and tolerate force, across its kind of across the whole organic system. So your body is literally constantly making sure that you can tolerate work, but a lot of the time to its own expense. And for us, obviously, the solution to this issue is obviously to bring more strength, more conditioning, more range into these key areas. We can't just be hoping that a superficial prod and poke is going to be enough. And I think, again, if you step back and look back at your recent history, like how's it working out for you? Like, it's one of the most kind of humbling and sobering questions to be asked. Like, great, so how's it working out for you? Because I hear people defending their position all the time. My other half Polly was telling me, defending her position the other day about, but it's like, yeah, I know it helps in the moment, a bit of massage, a bit of stretching, bit of, but it's not the problem is that you're lacking that range, you're lacking that conditioning, you're lacking that strength in those key areas, and your body is just compensating for it. So what we've got to do is put more work into those areas, and people just don't, that's the kind of the black and white of it. We're not doing enough in these areas, and it's something that we just have to, we need to bring in more into our week, because it's gonna change things. And I think a really nice concept to think about, guys, is this 1-to-1 ratio. When we talk about quadriceps to hamstrings, so if we want to keep it really kind of simple, like you just imagine that big old muscle belly on the front of your leg, quadriceps, big old muscle group on the back of your legs, we'll call it the hamstring. Obviously they merge into the glutes, etc. But there should be we basically want to be thinking about a 1-to-1 strength ratio. The amount of strength and conditioning you have in your quadriceps, however we test it, should be equal to that in your hamstrings and in the back end. Research has shown that actually it can be that hamstring group would be potentially could only needs to be 60 to 80%, but actually those are still lofty figures for a lot of people. I would say 95% of people who come through our training books literally have a probably 0.2, 0.1% ratio of hamstring strength to quadriceps. In other words, they can punch out 10, 15 single leg squats on each leg with reasonable quality, but have absolutely, bare minimum in their single leg hamstring bridge ability. They can punch out some reps, but they can barely find extension, and they can barely do it to a nice metronome beat. So a test for you guys, for those of you listening right now, like, where do you stand with regards to this, pardon the pun? Perform a set of single leg squats on your left and your right leg to a like a chair height. Can you lower yourself with control and simply kiss that surface behind you and drive back up. Watch yourself in the mirror. Can you perform 10, 15 to 20 reps on each leg? Likewise, lay on your back, hands across your shoulders, one foot up onto that edge of that chair or that box you're using. Drive your heel into that surface, knee just wider than 90 degrees behind the back of the knee. And now I want you to drive through that heel and bridge your hips to the ceiling and create that nice 180 degree angle in your hip. And then perform 10 to 15 to 20 reps of single leg hamstring bridges with a 1 second up, 1 second down metronome beat. Where do you stand? Do you have the ability? Do you have the capacity to perform those kinds of very, very basic single leg strength exercises with control, with consistency, with good eccentric lowering ability? Be very interesting to see what your results are. And guys, film it for yourself. You don't need a coach to do that. Just film it and see what you see. And you'll see most likely that you lack capacity through the back end. You lack capacity through that range. You probably feel that your quadriceps are being overly stretched at that point because your hip flexors and quadriceps just aren't used to being in those extended positions. But that is the type of testing you want to be running on yourself, and just calling yourself out. Like literally, nope, don't have the capacity back there. Right. So that mechanically, that means I can't extend my hips confidently and comfortably over longer distances. You probably can in the first 1 to 5K, but then running potentially, or the first half hour to 60 minutes of cycling, but then you've got nothing, and then you've got to start to compensate, and you've got to start to become more dominant through the quadricep. You've got to start leaning into those hip flexor muscle groups more because you don't have that capacity through the back end. And that's the like the stone cold truth of it, guys, is that like people just are strangely more focused on abusing themselves. I don't know if you guys have ever rolled your quadriceps or gone into your hip flexors with a roller, or like it's the sort of thing that you break a sweat doing, because it creates a level of mental stress that is quite incredible. But it's almost easier to do that than it is to flip on your back and start working on those hamstrings or start developing those. And maybe it's just lack of understanding of how accountability, of structure, or how much is enough. That's all. They're all fair questions to ask. But guys, it's crazy to think that in this day and age we're still kind of going around in circles from physio to physio, trying to ask, getting these kind of an osteos to kind of get these very archaic practices kind of reinforced, where you're just kind of stretching and poking and prodding the front side of our hips, where actually all the problems in the back end. Guys, you are way more educated than that. You have much greater understanding of your physiology than that. You don't need to be kind of relying on hope and that one little effort is going to change it. The fact is, guys, when it comes to changing the narrative of this, you're going to have to increase the range of motion through your hips. So we're definitely going to be working on mobility on a daily basis, dropping into a squat, working on that squat mobility, working on your hip hinge mechanics. So making sure that you really understand what that hip hinge looks like, where you're engaging your hamstrings and glutes, and then driving your hips through to hip extension, engaging your glutes in the back end. Then you also want to working on that kind of work, beginning into those deeper ranges of motion with comfort, with ease. We want relatively good mobility. We don't need to be hyper mobile. We don't need to be practicing yoga for 3, 4, 5 times a week. Like, you're going to be actually doing the opposite. You're going to be taking, as I said earlier on, you're going to be actually losing the ability to handle force, which is losing your athleticism. You can be too hyper mobile, and so you're going against it. So those of you who are excited to kind of jump into doing hours and more Pilates and etc., that's actually going to go against you. What we're looking for more than anything, guys, is your ability to work on mobility to a certain level. Then, guys, we need to then work out, where are you lacking conditioning, where are you lacking strength, and most likely, guys, it's going to be through those key muscle groups through the back end, posterior chain. So your glutes, your hamstrings, your adductor group, the inside of your groin. Where do you lie? What do they look like? Test them. Body weight strength wise. Now, can you stand on one leg? Can you hinge through one leg? Can you stand on one leg? Can you then punch out X amount of reps, double figure number of reps in the single leg squat, single leg hamstring bridge? Work on those areas, guys, because this is where the answer is going to come from. It's not going to come from being poked and prodded. And then, guys, build real world strength. You're someone who wants to run serious distance. You want to run fast distances. You want to be explosive on the bike, explosive in the water. Guys, you have got to be producing maximal strength, maximal power through your hip mechanics. You can't just think that being conditioned in just bodyweight strength is enough. Guys, we've got to crush that old version of you. And that old version of you was just weak. It was deconditioned. Be the opposite of that. Be the strongest version of yourself. So however strong you are, hopefully you're testing yourself regularly. You have an idea of what level of strength you have in your lower body. Double it. Like the results you see on our social media of people kind of being running PBs, getting over injury, running the furthest distances they've ever done, is because they are now twice as strong as they've ever been. Everywhere. In all of their posterior chain muscle groups, in all of their lower body strength muscle groups, in their ability to land, jump, hop, they're just doubling their numbers, because that's the mindset you want to have. You're not flirting with just bits and pieces here and there. Become a better version of yourself, and that's obviously going to be following a progressive strength and conditioning program that is going to be hitting you at least 2 to 3 times a week on those key muscle groups. So guys, I really want you to take some real control over these common problems that are just solvable. Like, I want you to have this kind of autonomy to be able to change the narrative for yourself. Stop relying on just whimsical ideas of treatments which are just based, you've got to keep going back. Like, the conversations around people who are seeing a physio every week is ludicrous. Like, you shouldn't have to see any health professional that often. Like, not even your strength and conditioning coaches should just be seeing them that often. You want to be learning and developing and evolving so much that your body, you're just resonating. You're just resonating at the frequencies that you want to work at. You're absorbing 100k of running. You're a week. You're able to jump on the bike and hit 100k of cycling if you wanted to, or just bugger off into the mountains and just do 5 days of trekking. Like, your body is able to respond to that, but you've got to be self-educating and understanding and absorbing this type of information, but then actually implementing it. And obviously, ton of our SFE crew listen to this podcast, but then so they're like, I'm speaking to them just as much as I am you guys, but they're obviously they're going to the next level by having that level of accountability in place. That's obviously keeping them just ticking boxes week in, week out, and they are very clear on what they need to be working on. And then periodically we're looking again at them. Right, what else do we need to be looking at? And guys, same issues: lower back pain, knee issues, Achilles issues, plantar fascial issues, landing mechanic issues. So what are we working on? Well, we're working on we're not telling them to massage themselves every other day, although we are prescribing it within their programming. But they're the 1%ers. What we're really telling them to do is get bloody strong. Get very competent at moving your own body weight, with load, with confidence, with those squat mechanics, with those hip hinge mechanics, like being ridiculously explosive in your legs again, not being fearful of those movements again. You get to a place like that, and that level of athleticism, you just rebound much quicker. It's not to say you don't have symptoms of tight hip flexors and tight quads, and not to say you don't go and get a massage ever again, or you don't need to do that myofascial release work, but you're not hanging off it. You're not like incessantly needing it all the time, because your body is at a level of conditioning and strength that your body just rebounds session after session, event after event. But it's understanding the physiology of it, guys, and crushing these misconceptions, working towards more those 1-to-1 ratios of front end to back end. Same concept, top end to bottom end. If you're neglecting your upper body strength, you're going to struggle in your overall mechanics. So, it's the same concept. We're looking for balance, holistic balance across the body. If we can find that in relative terms for you and your sport, we're going to be in a much, much greater place. So, just remember, guys, don't fear these words that get thrown around: quad dominant, blah blah blah. They're used, and they are then kind of abused. They are used to kind of draw you in to then just work on you, to just take your money, in a sense, like in a harsher sense. And like there's a bigger problem at hand that isn't being discussed. If it is being discussed and you're simply not acting on it, well, then maybe there's not enough framework involved there to actually keep you accountable to doing the work. And that's a different, that's obviously where you need to be on a program, not just getting a one-off kind of treatment. But if it's not being discussed at all, you're probably not in front of the right person, because they're very one-dimensional. They work, like when you're in front of anyone that knows their worth, is like you're trying to help an individual with the symptoms, but you're also trying to educate them so that they don't deal with those symptoms again. Because there's always business, right? You got to think, when you're working with athletes, there's always going to be business. There's always going to be things we need to be working on and addressing. And I think there's a lot of fear out there that if you educate people to a certain level, then they're not going to have any issues. We're all going to have things that we're working on, but to not be empowering the individuals you're working with, to not upskill them and educate them so that they can keep elevating their level and to keep, getting to a point where they are just, performing at their best, it doesn't seem right. So guys, squash that concept. Okay. Yes, a lot of us can become somewhat quad dominant, as in we are somewhat strong. We're stronger in certain areas. So our VMOs, etc., are stronger. Vastus medialis, etc., are stronger. But it doesn't mean that we then stop training them. It does not mean that we have to just keep working on stretching out these muscle groups. What we need to do is bring more balance to the body by working on those opposing muscle groups, those the back end, the hamstring group, the glute group, the adductor group. We need to be working on all those areas to bring more balance, and then bring them into synergy, creating more synergy within those. So jumping mechanics, heavier maximal loads. That is how we get you out of that, get you away from these types of reoccurring themes or issues. All right, guys, I hope that was useful. As always, guys, always love hearing from you. And if that's kind of triggered you and made you think about how getting a bit more accountable with your training, guys, always please reach out. Let us know how we can help. Happy to jump on a consultation call with you, talk about where you're at, what you're working with, what you're working towards. And looking forward to working with you guys. Speak soon.